happy to. Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Jason Sandman. I'm based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Originally born in Buffalo, New York, go Bills, and reside here on the East Coast of the United States. And happy to just jump right into the slide deck. Let's see. Matt, are you able to present on your side? I have some notes up on my screen here. Are you able to,
sure,
I
can pop it up on my side, and then you just give me the next slide, next slide.
I love that. That's really helpful. Thank you so much. Great. Let's do slide 3. Let's go to the next slide. So everyone, could you do the previous slide 3? That's great. So everyone, every population on this planet deserves the opportunity to adapt to climate change. This is an inherent belief for our climate services that will be presented and provided through Forward. And this particular session will demonstrate why how we think, and most importantly, how we feel, provides the foundation for successful climate adaptation programs, projects, and initiatives, regardless of your location. So my name is Jason Sandman, and I'm really grateful to be sharing this time with you today. We're going to have an intensive exploration of climate adaptation through a holistic lens. We're going to reveal some proven approaches to building resilience that actually work. In this interactive session, you'll learn key steps to ensure your adaptation projects, programs, and initiatives are grounded in genuine positive impact, secure funding, strive to meet the goals of the population that you serve, and demonstrate professionalism. Next slide, please. There's a lot of text here, and I just want to give everyone a chance to write stuff down. So I'm going to kind of talk slowly here to allow everybody to write stuff down. I just want to make sure to give praise to 2 very important people before we jump in. Thank you so much to Matt at Forward for reaching out and initiating communication, engaging with me, and sending a warm nudge in support of the global Forward community. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mahak, for the operational and technical support leading up to the presentation. I really appreciate your patience and healthy communication. And of course, welcome everyone who's viewing this presentation virtually. It's really heartening to see a global presence here. I love it. I was just reading through the chat box here, and it looks like we have a good representation globally. That's wonderful. As I quickly gaze over the attendees here, I actually see some names I recognize, and I'm having a bit of a fanboy moment here. I've been following some of your career trajectories for a while, and knowing you chose to be present for this invite gives me a little chills. I generally, in a professional acumen sense, look up and admire many of you here during this presentation, and I just want to say thank you to the Forward community for making me feel welcomed. This slide here gives a little bit of information about what we will and will not be discussing in our brief hour together. We're not going to dig too deeply into the myriad ways our global society is planning, designing, and deploying climate mitigation strategies. That's very, very helpful and needed. And although decarbonization is and always will be important for keeping global temperatures at relatively healthy and balanced state, it won't be the main topic today. I will not be negotiating or debating the merits of climate science. If you want to argue, debate, or challenge the science, you'd want to seek out a different audience. This space will definitely not be for you. I don't believe in sharing pictures of polar bears that are emaciated and hungry and having you draw the association that you should care more deeply about a malnourished mama polar bear than actually doing this work. That kind of presentation and slide might work for some, but it's not really my style. Just a couple housekeeping things here, and then we're going to jump right into the content. I'm really ambivalent when it comes to choosing whether you want to have your camera feature open or hidden. It's totally up to you. We're really growing up here in the Zoom generation, and I know all of you have a high aptitude for the audio and visual, and so you can totally choose to keep it on or off. But I do request right now, if you haven't done so already, to please mute yourself in favor of being less distracted by the music your peers might be playing or the dog barking next to you in the other room. Thank you so much. I will be prompting you a couple times during the presentation to actually unmute yourself and to have a discussion with me and provide some feedback. All right, so I promise I'm not going to talk at you for the whole duration. No one here joined to have me talk at them the whole time. So this presentation will have some levels of reciprocity. When prompted, I'd love to gauge your own unique circumstances, experiences, and knowledge about some of the content. I'll be overjoyed if you leave here wanting more information. So let's think about reciprocity and positive communication as kind of core themes as we go. And
let's do it.
Lastly, the last thing I want to say is if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them as soon as we can. All right, next slide, Matt. So again, a lot of text here. Feel free to write it down if you want. Are you on slide 5, Matt?
Is climate change investing where you currently live and impacting where you currently live?
Okay, we can do that. Sure, I'll skip to that one. Okay. Yeah, so I'd like to start just by having you all engaged here in the chat box. I'd love to just have individuals stay on mute and just let me know what climate change impacts are happening where you currently live. Whether you're in, you can describe it in terms of the habitat, a mountain region, a low-lying area. You can describe your region kind of geographically. Let me know what's happening and tell me a little bit about how it's a polycrisis for you. You know, human beings have a tendency to take bold action after a catalyst or a change, after an unpreferred event or situation takes place. And so with so many disasters, catastrophes, and incidents happening here in the States, I just wanted to get kind of a perspective and a framework for how it's affecting you. So I'm just going to read through the chat. And
as well as for some context, people can't unmute themselves, we don't think.
Oh.
So just for changes and updates on the presentation, if there's ever any times Jason says to talk, you can just post in the chat and I will be your voice.
Well, that's really helpful. Thank you, Matt.
We've got extreme heat. We've got extreme heat hitting some people.
For sure.
We've got a lot of muting going on. I would say, yeah, warmer winters in New York. The snow is certainly much less than when I was growing up as a kid. And for some of the ones where it takes a bit of time, it might be worth moving forward and then jumping back. Vancouver has been rainy, hot, and dry as a bone the past 5 summers. Forest fires through the province, forest fires everywhere. California certainly had forest fires.
Great. Yeah. This is all evidence of climate change. You got it. Water scarcity in Egypt. Thank you. Yep. Yeah, Francisco. I saw this Scotland we're actually going to touch upon Scotland's national adaptation plan in a few slides. Yep. Drought and wildfires. Awesome. All right, Matt, let's move to the 7th slide there titled Resilience. Thank you, everyone, for jumping in here. Okay, let's think about the most resilient living thing on this planet. What living thing has adapted the most in order to thrive? What features does it exhibit that allow it to persevere and thrive? Again, please don't Google this question. I have Googled it, and I know the response. I don't want to talk about the tardigrades. Let's post. What do you think? What creature, what living thing, plant or animal, exhibits the most resilience? Oh, a virus. Sure. Yeah, viruses. Excellent, Matt, for sure. Life doesn't just test you, it really shapes you. And your unique lived experience informs much of the human being that you've become and continue to develop into. Your cells are changing, your body is changing, you're evolving. You really want to be able to adapt to climate change. We're going to think a little bit about resilience here too. Consider what specific features both inform resilience and to what extent what factors, both internal and external, allow you to practice resiliency. Bacteria, viruses. Humans are pretty adaptable. We're going to find out how much resilience they actually have as it gets more challenging to live on this planet. Yeah, plankton, horseshoe crabs. Thank you, Josh, for sure. Cockroaches, yes. All right. The scientific and design field of biophilia informs a lot of how we design in the world, and we think about resilience for all these plants and creatures and animals. And it's good to start thinking about Cher. I didn't really think about that. She was not on my list. Thank you for that, Christopher. All right, Matt, let's go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about resilience. All right, these are the resilient skills. Let's see if share lines up with some of these skills. We will be sharing the slides after the presentation, so there's really no need to rush through and write all this down. I'm going to go a little slow on this slide and just kind of read this text here and go over some examples of what it means to be resilient. And then we're going to jump into talking about climate adaptation. There's a lot of free resources I'm going to try to share throughout the presentation. Here's one takeaway that I'd love for you guys to consider and think about as you move forward with your own climate journeys. This is a list of 8 features of resilience. It's not really in a specific hierarchy or order. The top one doesn't make you more resilient than the bottom one. You can persevere through rejection as a teenager, then maybe be misunderstood as an artist in your 20s, hit rock bottom, and climb your way up in your 30s. This list really reminds us about how we can align resilient skills with climate resiliency, whether infrastructure being more resilient, communities and populations being more resilient, your home, where you start, your individual resilience, they're all comparable to this list. So life and living on this planet provides you opportunities to evaluate your own resilience. Facing adversity over and over again provides opportunities for living, learning, pivoting, adapting, and development in a way that challenges you. You can choose. It's really your choice. When you're becoming more resilient, you choose. Do you want to become hardened and emotionless, or grounded, powerful, and caring? Here are some human features of resilience. Feel free to take notes. Again, we're going to share the slide deck at the end of the presentation, so you don't have to sprint to write all this down. But I just want you to think about the transformative power of climbing your way back up from a low point in your life, thinking about how grief and a deep loss provides opportunities for you to be more resilient. Again, being hardened or to grow. Reinventing yourself. All things that I've tried to practice in my own life. All right, I'm not going to read every single one. I want to get through a bunch of slides here, so let's go to the next slide. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. All right, so when in doubt, let's default to the science. When you face discomfort or a challenge, you could choose to keep going, and your brain's neural circuits are strengthened through a process called neuroplasticity. Over time, that rewiring helps you recover faster from setbacks and engage more effectively with stress. Small repeated acts of follow-through reinforce this neural loop. If you would decide to avoid these difficult acts, you're weakening your neuroplasticity. Every time you avoid a non-preferred task, your direct avoidance actually weakens your cognitive abilities. So in other words, tackle the difficult thing first. Another way to strengthen your neural pathways and thus hone your own individual resilience is a mindful meditation practice. I'm just curious, real quickly, anybody want to hit the thumbs up or clap icon? Let me know if you've practiced meditation on your own or with a group where you live.
Also add in how often you're able to do it, or if it's something you struggle with where you do, and then like me, always somehow lose and you're not resilient enough to keep up the resilience.
It's not a competition to be more, you put the superlative, the best resilience, the most resilient. It's not really a competition. I just want to provide opportunities to think through ways you can strengthen your own neuroplasticity, make yourself more resilient. Maybe in the future, Matt, we can discuss with all these global chapters throughout the world, we can have maybe meditation practices and see if individuals want to get together for that. It's kind of a accountability buddy system for resilience. So scientific research confirms that structured effort, exposure to manageable stress, and goal-directed behavior all support the growth of this bounce-back circuitry. So next time you have some free time, meditate. But first, tackle the thing you're avoiding. Your neural network and your resilience will shine. All right, let's see what's next. I realize that, we're going to go up to that slide in 10 seconds. I'm aware I'm demonstrating some cognitive bias here, but I wanted to provide my input. I didn't provide my answer to what might be the most resilient population or living thing in this world. I've given it some thought, and I know it's a little controversial, but I think single mothers are the most resilient population on this planet, especially ones with limited social capital in their lives, limited family, neighbors, friends. Single mothers every single day have to persevere and show some grit, and their resilience is tested every day, every hour. All right, Matt, next slide. Thank you.
And I would challenge you to be more resilient in telling you go a little faster because I know how many slides you have and you're going to run into trouble.
All right, slide 10. We're about a third of the way through the presentation. We're doing great. How many of you are familiar with the field and discipline of anthropology? Whether academically you studied it or maybe you have gone out as a volunteer on an excavation dig one time. This woman here is Margaret Mead, and she's very influential in the field of cultural anthropology. And so the first few slides talked more about the individual and the self. And I think self-awareness is really the foundation of looking externally at supporting others. But looking through the individual scale as we cultivate our own inner development, it's very fitting for how we support others. And I think this is where kind of climate altruism comes into play. So we're going to look at climate adaptation here on a bit larger scale now and think about the social and cultural population lens. The ability to recognize and respond to the suffering of others the ability to recognize and respond to the suffering of others is a fundamental aspect of advanced societies. I'm going to read that again. The ability to recognize and respond to the suffering of others is a fundamental aspect of advanced societies. Margaret Mead, her definition. Oh, go back. I'm sorry, Matt. Going back to that Margaret Mead slide.
Oh, it's still Margaret Mead.
Yep. Her definition of an advanced culture was in the medical anthropological lens. If you had a repaired femur, if your femur broke and the society was able to repair it long before modern day medicine, that was her definition of an advanced society. I think if you were to ask individuals now their definition of an advanced society, many would probably not say a healed femur from being broken. And I think about that a lot because a broken femur is a death sentence for a lot of animals in our society. We're all social beings. Every one of you is a social creature and relies on others in another way. And I think that's a really strong and powerful way to think about how we connect with others. All right, Matt, next slide, please. Let's look at climate adaptation through the cultural lens. I want you to kind of think through climate justice, whether that's like reparations or thinking about how downstream communities are impacted by fossil fuel production. Think about how a healthy climate justice program or initiative might actually look in terms of implementation. What features does it exhibit? You know, as you think about the cultural and medical anthropology for a moment, and you look at that tangible stuff, the things we can see and feel, those places and spaces require adaptation in a really rapidly changing world. Some people call this infrastructure work or infrastructure risk analysis, but I call it cultural heritage. I like to think about this in terms of assets. What assets are we truly talking about? Assets that are facing severe drought that were mentioned earlier, rapid flooding, exposure to heat, the cultural heritage all around, the traditions, the knowledge and places. On this slide deck, we have a picture here of Venice, Italy. Those rivers experience flooding. There's moss in Mali that are being exposed to drought and heat and are deteriorating. Indigenous graveyards and sacred coastal sites in Alaska that are being exposed to storm surge and flooding from also from the melting of permafrost in northern Alaska. Each community is exposed to climate in different ways. And I just wanted to kind of put that out there and frame this in kind of an international way. All right, Matt, next slide. Thank you so much. As you think through or maybe feel through some of these changes in the climate justice way, a healthy climate justice program or initiative, what does it actually look like in terms of implementation? What features does it exhibit? Yes, Josh, I see your comment in the chat. Genes and culture go hand in hand. You're totally right. My caution is this. There really are large cultural gaps in climate policy and planning. For anyone who has listened to the Conference of Parties dialogue at the COP parties, you might have recognized that international climate negotiations often leave out details around supporting cultural groups. Some might argue we can solve a problem that we can't measure. I would argue that phrase is only half true. If your data measurement only includes quantitative data, that which can use a specific metric for measuring, you really only have half of what needs to be measured. Climate adaptation practices will always conduct vulnerability assessments, monitor and evaluate the quantitative and the qualitative. Here's what I mean by this. When you develop a high level of emotional IQ, when you deeply listen to others, when you remove any stubborn cognitive biases, you can really begin to connect with other individuals and you can measure what really matters to them. The qualitative side of data measurement is just that. It's gathering together feelings and emotions from the populations that you serve through climate adaptation. It's a form of social work. We're going to discuss this in more detail as we move along and get into kind of the granular, detailed, and nuanced ways we gather data. But I just want to throw it out there. I think a lot of climate adaptation work globally now really is social work. And these practitioners rely heavily on the qualitative data side into it, and that informs their strategies, programs, and initiatives. All right, Matt, next slide, please.
That's one thing that's really challenging, I would say, with qualitative versus quantitative. A lot of funding and grants prefer quantitative, so you can have demonstratable results. That's one of the biggest challenges we have with Forward when we've applied for grants is we're helping a lot of folks out there and we can't really quantify how we're doing that or the connections we're making or how much that accelerates your career, climate goals, impact, etc. So if you find what we're doing valuable, please pay it back forward by sharing this with a friend, bring someone to a local meetup, share the group, the community, and help us grow the impact so that we can grow the overall movement and resilience, adaptation, mitigation, and everything else.
I think that part of being a good educator, being a good teacher, is you understand that you don't know everything and you're always willing to learn. The conversations I've had, I'm going on a sidebar here for 30 seconds, with funders, donors, grant-making institutions, they're willing to learn. They don't always have boots on the ground staff dedicated to serving the populations. And so they offer these grants and provide opportunities because they believe in what you are doing and how you want to challenge maybe a status quo or how you want to serve a population. If you can get the qualitative side, if you can get Jane Doe or John Smith to express how your grant is impacting them locally, I think that part is really imperative in changing the minds of board members at a grant foundation or about these people that are making the grants possible. So we can dive into that for another presentation. I want to get through this, but think about that as we continue with the slides. All right, so here's the nitty gritty, and here's the nuanced part of climate adaptation that I want to get into. Now we've established some baseline understanding at an individual scale. We're going to move into a much larger scale here. We're going to talk about human-based approaches to climate adaptation. In the chat box, I'd love to hear responses. Does anybody know, looking at this image here, what plant species that we're looking at here? Okay, you can take a guess. No wrong answers. Let me know in the chat box what plant is right there on the right side of the screen. I'll give you a clue. It's used often in a lot of communities that are low-lying, especially near the ocean.
Yes,
Carolina.
mangroves.
Yes, you are right. Mangroves. So many co-benefits. Mangroves. Yes, Andra. Yep. It's a nature-based solution, and it's used a lot with societies that are doing coastal protection work. Mangroves sequester carbon. They provide biodiversity support, ecosystem resilience. They also support livelihoods and economic support for a lot of female populations. We're going to get into this in a couple slides. I want to make sure we all understand this. Separating the ecological side from the human side of climate impacts is really a fallacy. Both the human and the ecological, the biodiversity crisis we're seeing, they're embedded. They must collaborate in harmony for shared outcomes to ultimately be implemented in work, for them to come into balance. Every Homo sapien here has evolved from a single cell organism, and we've all evolved in nature. We are intricately linked. If you adjust and tailor your approaches for incorporating nature-based solutions with understanding human impacts, you've created a collaborative advantage. I didn't say competitive advantage here. I'm not thinking about market-based systems here. I'm thinking about collaborative advantages. This is not a sport or a competition. We're thinking about collaborative advantage in the way that climate services should never be about competition at a local level. They're about supporting both plant and biodiversity and human populations on the ground.
How do we do that how do we do that and stay in that mindset when grant funding is a here or there? So people are literally competing with one another for those same grants. How do we stay in a collaborative rather than a combative mindset?
Is that a rhetorical question, or do you want me to answer that?
No, that's a question for you.
Great. Thank you for posing that. It's really important. The foundation or donor, the bank providing the loan, the group that's submitting the funds might look at it as it being competitive. In order to actually implement and execute a positive climate adaptation strategy, you're not doing this alone. It's not a silo. You're going to require partners. There's critical stakeholders that you have to communicate with and get on board. There's local communities you're supporting, local governments that have to actually help this thing survive long term. Because there's so many different populations that directly and indirectly are impacted by the work, you have to get really good at harnessing your collaborative advantage skill set and specialties to actually implement it. And so, yes, the initial maybe grant that you're writing or the request you're making for funding, if you're looking externally for funding, it might be competitive. But to truly implement and execute, to have some positive impact, you must be collaborative in your practice. And I think that's what I'm getting at here. If your community outreach, the government agency coordination, the partners, the community, the local, if you're working with religious groups, the local pastor, if you're working with like local council people or mayors, there's so much collaboration needs to happen for stakeholder buy-in, for all of that. And I think that's really important to think through as you're trying to implement adaptation strategies. Okay, went off on a little tangent there. Thank you, Matt, for asking that question. Happy to dig more into that if you want to contact me after the presentation. Next. Okay, another caution I have here with a capital C. Climate adaptation is everyone's problem, but no one specific individual's responsibility. If you think about that in terms of the global context here, we're trying to keep temperatures below 1.5. We didn't do too great with that. We're trying to keep temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius. 8.5 billion of us on this planet. How can we, in a world that's all being impacted, think about collaboratively how we solve this together? Large-scale initiatives to reduce the physical climate risk for communities are essential, but they are often very expensive up front, even if they have a high ROI or long-term benefits. What's really needed is low-cost money. States and local governments have to step in, and they have to put their plans together and move beyond just disaster risk management to forward-looking strategies. This image here represents maladaptation. Not male as in the gender male, but maladaptation as a prefix meaning bad adaptation. We're going to discuss this in a future slide, but I want to just say here, the mangroves you saw on the last slide, that looked great. Sometimes mangroves might have the best intention, but these were destroyed. These were destroyed due to the presence of salt ponds adjacent to them and also chemical runoff from a local agricultural practice. The intent with the mangroves was correct, but the execution and foresight were very poor. And this is an example of maladaptation. The title here that 17 of the 20 countries most vulnerable to climate adaptation are on the continent of Africa. There's an opportunity for you. Those are populations that will need a lot of support. They can't suffer through a lot of maladaptation practices. We're going to have to do better, much better. Okay, next slide, Matt. Okay, with every natural disaster and every catastrophe, we expose gaps, especially here in the United States, in our federal disaster response, and preparedness. What role really should early warning systems play during floods that impact populations like school children in Texas over the summer to summer camp? We can talk a little bit about the proactive and prevention side of climate adaptation. Now, these impacts can become less severe, or better yet, put on extinction once and for all. I'm just curious, with thumbs up, icon, or hand clapping or something positive, has anyone here ever heard of national adaptation plans?
Yes, and they always come from Singapore or the Middle East or Southeast Asian countries.
There's one here. Scotland has a national adaptation plan. Back during the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015, it was encouraged for every country to have some kind of formal document demonstrating how they are not only going to adapt, but actually implement. Plan is the exact opposite of implementation. If you're going to plan something, the plan is only as good as the execution and implementation of that plan. So as part of the nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, countries who have endorsed the Paris Agreement are pledging to put pen to paper, and they actually are going to be held responsible for executing and implementing those plans. National adaptation plans, they really outline the medium and long term for how a country is going to implement adaptation. They're designed to fit the unique challenges of localized problems and climate risks. There are governments, climate finance groups, local populations, institutions. This is the climate collaborative advantage specialties that are critical. And these national adaptation plans, wherever you live, research it, look it up. The United States does not have a national adaptation plan, but many, many countries do. Check it out. I've got a lot of context here for national adaptation plans, but I want to push through these slides, so I'm going to save this for another time. But they're always context specific. They're always localized. They might be modeled and based on how other countries are doing it. But even small island states, very vulnerable populations, have national adaptation plans. That's a great place to check out. All right, next step, please. Next slide.
So
okay.
People can check these out after. I can play it, but they won't hear audio.
They won't hear audio. Oh, my friends. Okay. It's a 3-minute video here on adaptation.
Chombelele angala bindzu la hina la tiko hi ku swoswi.
It was very clear that where you had mangroves, the coast was significantly more protected than in places where you don't have mangroves. This project was very innovative in Mozambique and in the Western Indian Ocean region. They are using hydrological restoration. Essentially, you open channels inside the forest, allowing seawater to come in with seedlings, seeds, and propagules, and the results are stunning. You have places where you just planted seedlings and places where you also did hydrological restoration. The trees grow much faster. The forest tends to be denser and look more like a natural.
I just want the audio and the video to try to sync up there for a second.
It's not going to work because it's playing through my speakers, but people will be able to access the video just fine after the presentation.
Okay. Can we try to play it one more time from where we left off and try it again? If it doesn't work, it doesn't.
Mas o desafio é de fazer com que a comunidade reconheça o valor da restauração de mangá. O projeto até vai nas escolas, ensina crianças, isto para garantir o futuro desta restauração.
Aku nini ku vona ku cinca loko ku sunguliwe a ntshatsha lowa wu balaka misinya a swi tlhava leswi swi nga ni koho se swi pfalekile ya ku dileka ka combe ku pfalekile a moya lowu nga bawi hi tinjira hinkwawo muganga se ni wu vona na wu belanyana henhla. Ntirho lowu wa misinya lowu hi wa tika matirhelo ya wona kambe hi ku vona swa ku u ni lisima a hi titwi ku a ku karhateka hi swoho hi ku hi swi tirhela lomu emugangeni ya hina para ku hi sirhelela muganga wa hina.
The oldest forest that we have here was planted in 2010, so they are 12 years old, but we still need more time to store the same amount of carbon as a natural forest. We could say the same about coastal protection. They are still not performing like a natural forest. Does that mean that restoration is not a good option? No, it is, but it just highlights that we should not degrade the mangroves because it will take a lot of time to get the ecological services back.
Oops. There we go. Jason?
I was on mute. Okay, back. Thank you, Matt. IT support there. So just want to touch upon that video there. We saw an example of how mangroves are used locally to support local populations. With a lot of nature-based interventions, the plants that are being used aren't always fully mature. So a caution is that, yes, you can't sequester as much carbon as a 2,000-year-old forest, but the process has to start somewhere. Those mangroves are providing immediate benefit for restoration, for biodiversity support, for economic benefits. And I think no intervention is going to be perfect. Perfection's the enemy of completion, and you should never really strive for perfection. But the mangroves were a great option for that particular population. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So, nope, the one before that, Matt. Yep, right there. Thank you so much, Matt. Foresight, the ability to anticipate and plan for unintended consequences, is definitely a climate adaptation skill. For those that are looking to expand your LinkedIn profile or grow your CV, I think foresight is a great climate adaptation related skill set that you should add. Now, adaptation is much more elusive than mitigation. It can be difficult to quantify, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. A frantic effort has been underway since last year's COP29 to construct indicators that are ready for prime time. That means ready for implementation as we monitor and evaluate climate adaptation work. There are now 78 technical experts working to put together 100 manageable indicators for climate adaptation work. Once you have your vulnerability risk assessment and you want to start decreasing vulnerability, those 100 metrics that we use to measure climate adaptation work will really come in handy. They're being prepared now at the Conference of Parties. They should be coming out shortly. And I'm really excited to see what they are, because that details the nuance of how we actually monitor, evaluate, and can take good data on how this work is being implemented. So keep close to that. I'm sure I can reach out to Matt and we can share that with the population here through the Forward community. Okay, next.
It's all good in theory. What about in practice with finite restraints? How do we do this?
Yep, that's exactly it right here. So the next few, like 4 or 5 slides, I'm going to kind of speed through. It's a lot of text. You don't have to memorize this. You also don't have to write it down. We're going to share the slides after. But there's a really great organization, the Skull Center, based out of the UK, and they do really great work with social metrics, with measuring how we can monitor and evaluate social impact work. And so I have a few slides here that use the social work framework. Next, like 3 or 4 slides. And again, I'm just going to kind of speed through this because I can't go line by line item. But I think this is really helpful for you as wherever you are in your climate adaptation and resiliency journey, whether you're thinking about getting into it and you want to use some of this content to talk through a job interview, or you're a well-established firm and you're really looking to think about how you monitor and evaluate and reach populations, compare this with how you're currently doing it. So the next few slides, Matt, I know we're at a quarter till, and so I'm just going to ask Matt, maybe you could skip like 3 or 4 more slides.
And while I'm skipping those, NGOs, local organizations, municipalities are also really idealists when it comes to climate adaptation clients and the types of people who really need to be implementing these. Because let's face it, a lot of times the corporates don't either have the budget or more likely want to use the budget on things that matter. But this affects you and your community. So community leaders, NGOs, government agencies, municipalities, this is the type of work that we and Jason does with us here at Forward. Go ahead, Jason, with which slide? This one?
Yeah, so these slides with the skull center in the bottom right, yeah, there you go. Thank you so much. I want to give time for questions. All right, so I put together this slide. I think this is a takeaway slide for all of you. This is the top 20 global climate funding organizations currently that are doing climate adaptation and resilient work. We talked very briefly in a few slides about how the grant money, the funding, the dedicated sustainable funds to keep your organization afloat or your services afloat, they might come directly or indirectly from some of these groups right here. The one that I have, a red asterisk, USAID, has been discontinued on the current federal United States administration, but the rest of them are all active. And I want to give you a chance to look at this slide and think through about your own engagement with funders and donors. Who are you getting your money from? Who's funding this work? If it's coming externally, these are groups that are funding a lot of the global and international climate adaptation and resiliency work. And so we can talk specifically about strategies to, and I think we do that in the very next slide, keeping donors and funders not just happy, but well-informed. And so that talks a little bit about the qualitative side of your data collection with the population you serve. Getting them to be a voice for the work is hugely impactful as you go back to your donors and funders and talk about the positive impact you're having.
And we added a link here as well for our fundraising and grant resources and databases. So we have other grant providers, funders, foundations as well that you can check, all right on the platform for you guys to review.
Okay.
And if you need help with grants, we can help you there as well. Part of our climate consulting collective. We'll talk later.
Often big climate funds target larger governments or larger collaborative efforts. With honestly, that makes a lot of sense. They have the staff capacity, they have budgets that can meet the funders where they are. But small towns, informal settlements, places without the capacity to win millions of dollars, they need help too. Do these populations that live there deserve to adapt to climate change? Of course they do. But how can they compete for necessary financial capital? Did you know that nearly half of American communities with very low staff or internal capacity to respond to disasters face high flood or wildlife risk? Yet 75% of the federal resiliency grants go to high capacity areas, and it leaves small rural towns behind. 3 pictures here that I have here are 3 different places of small groups, small populations, vulnerable populations getting together and trying to stop that gap in funding and resources going to larger groups. Three Forks, Montana. They updated their flood risk map at the municipal government level, and it led to them getting $4.15 million in funding at the federal level from FEMA to help with flood mitigation. You know, for some of those individuals in the United States who heard about the summer camp in Texas, where the children and some of the camp counselors died in floods. What's happening now is groups are getting together and they're using drones to measure rural flood maps. And it's a stacking of positive co-benefits from this update in rural flood maps. They're improving accuracy, finally. They're going to start implementing an enhanced preparedness in this small town of Texas, faster response and recovery rates, and they're going to save lives and resources, which is great. The Global Center on Adaptation in in collaboration with Suez Consultancy, are helping a small group in East Africa with making their own localized adaptation plan. It's called the People's Adaptation Plan, and it's actually owned by local communities. It's built on community-led mapping, climate risk assessments, and neighborhood consultations. They're mapping out future climate risk assessments, and it's just really powerful to see all these groups getting together. Unfortunately, many of them after a catalyst, after something has happened, but it's good to see it's taking place at a local level. All right, Matt, next slide. I think we're going to get through all these slides this morning. Okay, if you haven't fallen asleep yet, great. I want to see you in the chat box. I want to know if you know financially what the return on investment, the ROI, on climate adaptation projects, programs, or initiatives are. No wrong answer. Type in a dollar amount. $1, $5, $5 billion. What do you think the ROI is on climate adaptation projects? It's been quantified here, and I'll give you a clue. The World Resource Institute, in a 2025 study, was able to produce some financial metric on it. You're welcome to go in the chat box. Let me know. What do you think it is?
I would argue it's unquantifiable, and that's the problem, because it's future perspective, and then you're always underwriting against an undefined future. I think it should be an enormously high number, but that not enough effort will be put into those initiatives because there's not as much trust in the urgency of them or the results that will come. That would be my thoughts on where the skepticism mostly lies. I think it's certainly necessary, but I think it's hard to quantify.
Samil, great question. It is a per project. So if you're putting in $1 for your climate adaptation project, of course, no one puts in $1. What would the ROI be, the financial ROI for that $1? As you type in your answers here in the chat box, I'm going to let you know that according to the World Resource Institute, they looked at 12 countries globally, and the study found every $1 invested in adaptation, US dollar, it can yield anywhere between $10 to $15 in net benefits. That analysis provides really compelling evidence for scaling adaptation finance. We can improve data collection and appraisal methods. Yep, $10 to $15 range for every $1 invested. Yes, Matt. Yep, average of $1 to $6 to $8. A little bit higher than that, Matt. Oh yeah, or Josh, I'm sorry. I said Matt, I meant Josh. Yes, Josh. Some studies 1 to 17. I've looked at climate mitigation projects on the technical side, like carbon, storing carbon, energy improvement upgrades at a house. It's not as high as the financial benefit of $1 to $10 to $15 for a climate adaptation project.
Well, that part's obvious. It's like healthcare. You can invest in keeping people healthy, or you can invest in fixing the problem. The fixing the problem is so much more expensive, and that's what mitigation is.
The economists here that are listening to me on this, or the accountants, might get upset with how I phrase this, but and I'm always learning and trying to get better at this. There's a triple dividend of resiliency framework that's used. It's an approach that considers avoided losses, which means like all the assets that you were able to mitigate harm from flooding or climate impacts, the induced economic benefit, so like all the financial ROI, and the development benefits, which is really huge on like the human and social benefits of a climate adaptation project. You look at all three of those and you come out with that average of 1 to 10 or even as high as 1 to 15 for the financial ROI on your climate adaptation resiliency project. That's huge. Anytime you hear someone say in government, in the corporate sector, as a funder, we can't make the argument that we should invest in climate adaptation and resiliency projects. The ROI isn't there. Show them this report. Show them this report. It's been quantified, and it's a breakthrough. and I'm so glad I'm able to share this report with you. And big thanks to the World Resource Institute for providing this. I think I put the URLs there for the project. Okay, next. Yes, Matt, thank you so much. I spent a lot of time in that slide. All right, quickly. On this chart here, this goes back to the World Resource Institute study. This yields $13 in benefit. $1, $13 in benefit. $7 from reduced economic cost, $6 due to reduced damage, total of 13. It's awesome. You can use this data from this chart to, again, argue your case that climate adaptation and resiliency work is worth the investment. Okay, next, Matt. Next slide. We're doing great. International climate policy. Things are happening. Groups are getting organized. Advocacy is happening. The Loss and Damage Fund. Not enough money in it yet, but there is funding at the international global level through the UN mandates here. Loss and damage refers to harm caused by climate changes that go beyond what mitigation or adaptation can prevent. We're seeing small island states, vulnerable populations out in the Pacific Atlantic Ocean that are using this loss and damage fund to help become more resilient. Okay, thank you, Matt. Next slide. Great, yeah, right there. Actually, stay right there, Matt. Great. This next slide, the global goal on adaptation. It involves a collective commitment to action and support, particularly for developing countries. The goal here is to unify efforts and mobilize resources for adaptation on a scale that's comparable to mitigation. Okay, Matt, next slide. We're gonna get through all this. International Court. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of this. Maybe you could give me a thumbs up or hand clapping. International Court of Justice. Landmark climate opinion just this summer. They're reshaping the legal fight between governments, corporations, and activists. The World Court said, failing to cut greenhouse gas emissions could constitute an internationally wrongful act declared by national climate plans, and they must align with 1.5 degrees Celsius target. What does that mean? Although the International Court's opinion here is not legally binding for any country, the ruling is huge for optimism and hope amongst the climate community. We can use that opinion to help push courts to get on our side, and maybe we can win some legal cases against big polluters and fossil fuel companies. Okay, the last few slides are resources for you. I want to give this to you before we leave. Okay, features of maladaptation. We just discussed this already. I'll skip over that. Okay, takeaways from this presentation. The previous slide, Matt, one back, please. I want you all to feel empowered after this. Engage in community resilience and preparedness. Decrease the population you want to support, local, state, regional, federal, indigenous populations. Decrease their vulnerability to climate impacts. Get involved in their vulnerability assessments. I want you to leave here thinking about this. Oh, go back, Matt, one slide. Skeptical of the phrase scaling climate adaptation. What works in one region very rarely works in another region. Be skeptical of scaling climate adaptation. You need to take into consideration localized populations, the culture, the uniqueness, the current context of the lived experience there. That's good data for qualitative data collection. What are the place-based needs for the population in the Himalayas that's different from the Tempe, Arizona group that wants to get solar PV on their homes? Adaptation is inherently local and very much context specific. If you're looking to get into this work, you don't know where to go engage with disaster risk emergency planning at a local level. All of you that want to get professional certifications and credentials, I put 3 URLs here at the top. Click on it, go look at ways to stay educated. Educated, informed, professional credentialing is a strategic imperative. It will only help you in the long term. Do it. Books I'm reading, books I love. Check those out. Local public library, literature review that I'm looking at. And those are a bunch of international organizations, NGOs, stakeholder groups that I am really fond of and admire that I think would be great to share with all of you. Last slide. Matt, I'm giving you 1 minute for the last slide. We did it.
And thanks everybody for attending this. We hope that this has been valuable and given you some more insights into adaptation, resilience, and building out a better future for all. If this is something that your organization, your government, your NGO, your local initiative needs help with, then we can certainly support you. Jason's part of our climate consulting collective. Submit a request or reach out at forward.earth/consulting, and you can learn more about our fundraising and investment advisory, strategy, business development, growth, sales, branding, grants, tax credits, legal and IP support. If it sounds like we do a little bit of everything, it's because we do. We have awesome experts like Jason in our consulting collective here to help support you. If you're on the industry and corporate side of things, we do ESG and net zero, corporate decarbonization, hiring and HR, tax accounting, CFO services for startups, and of course, if you need carbon footprinting or LCAs. We're here to help you, and that's our way to help us make Forward sustainable. So if you need support on these type of initiatives, efforts, or to advance your climate impact, then forward.earth/consulting. And if you found this session valuable, be sure to share this and or the community and events with a friend so we can grow our global impact, because local's great and local adaptation is critical, but unless we have global movement and global change, then our globe in and of itself is in trouble. Thanks, folks, for coming in. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, let's move the world forward together. Sound good? Guess I can stop sharing and go back to us now. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully this has been valuable. If there's any questions that you haven't had answered yet, post them now in the chat. Otherwise, all of the members, everyone you see here, you've all got profiles. You're all on the platform. You can reach directly out, message each other, set up calls, and we highly recommend reaching out to other members in the space and connecting, sharing why you think it would be a good fit or how you can help each other, because you're all here to move the world forward, and the best way to do that is together. Any last words, Jason?
Oh, this was so great. Really feeling motivated. I have to sneak away from my kids' parent-teacher conference, but I'm going to actually put in the chat box, there was a question about the professional credentialing and certifications. I will cut and paste those now and put them in the chat box for...
And we can upload we'll upload the presentation as well to the event page. So you can get the full recording as well as Jason's awesome PowerPoint right there by visiting the same page that this is on in a little bit. Sound good?